Hi, everybody. My name is Kathleen Walker, and today is April 21st, 2026, and I've been posting these videos as a form of therapy in the recovery from the trauma of watching my little brother, Paul Kieran, 64, with Down syndrome, be locked up by the British Columbia New Democratic Party government, David Eby's leader, Nikki Sharma, as Attorney General for 588 days. And then I watched Paul be killed. I believe they did medical assistance in dying on him, although he was not capable of consenting to it. So they locked Paul away after Paul and I had grown up together and we visited at will for 64 years. But they locked him up when I complained to the Burnaby RCMP about when I discovered what I alleged to be a secret, fraudulent and forged power of attorney the government created to give Paul the COVID-19 shot. They appointed my then 82-year-old Catholic nun sister 4,000 kilometers away in Ontario as Paul's guardian. And I had to actually get a court order in order to even see this document. I did everything that I could think of to try and restore Paul's freedom in our visits. I was his last surviving family member and visitor, and he was my last surviving family member from my family of 6 adult children and my mother that had moved to Greater Vancouver. I fought through the courts. I was trained as a government psychologist with mentally handicapped adults, and then I became a federal prosecutor, and after that practiced for 23 years as a family lawyer. And I was very successful for the most part. And I tried everything that I could think of to try and restore Paul's freedom, but I just wasn't able to do it. I went to the Supreme Court of Canada twice and was never given permission to appeal. So I got a call exactly 2 years ago on April 15th of 2024. I got a call from my sister's lawyers. My sister was represented by 2 law firms, an Ottawa law firm and a Vancouver law firm, Borden, Ladner, Gervais, with Casey Deanshaw was her Vancouver lawyer. I estimate the Catholic Church, of which I'm a paying member, spent up to $2 million on keeping my brother confined and representing my nun sister. But I got a call saying that Paul had had a stroke in custody, but that I could arrange through the lawyer to visit Paul. I immediately dropped everything and went to the hospital, and I discovered that the nun, Paul had had the stroke actually 2 days earlier, and I was not informed. The nun waited until to see if he would die, and when she could see he hadn't died, she flew in from Ontario, and she only allowed me a 10-minute per day visit with Paul. When I saw him, he seemed to be doing remarkably well. I was amazed. He grabbed my hand and squeezed it so tight when I said my name. And he grabbed a book from my hand and set up and turned the pages perfectly, scanned the pictures perfectly. He had an oxygen mask on at the time. And then exactly 2 years ago on this date today, I got a telephone call from the Burnaby RCMP, and the officer told me that they had been ordered by their Ottawa Oversight Agency to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. I got that call at about 6:30, and then that officer sent me a letter, which was by then a month old, to me from the officer in charge of the Burnaby detachment of the RCMP police, just saying that they had been ordered by Ottawa to reopen the investigation into the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. So I immediately went to court the next morning and asked the judge who was overseeing the case to suspend my sister's guardianship of my brother pending the investigation of the RCMP. And we didn't get on. But by then, my sister knew that the RCMP had informed me about this fraudulent, that they had been ordered to investigate the fraudulent and forged power of attorney. And when I went into Paul's hospital room that day for my visit, she wouldn't look me in the eye, but she said through gritted teeth, "Say goodbye to Paul, he's dying." And she stood over him. She wouldn't let me get near his face, but his oxygen mask, his ventilator had been removed, and his eyes were wide open and unfocused. He was perfectly still. I believe that I was watching him be killed, that they had removed his ventilator. She had ordered the physician, Dr. Michael Baker, and I'd complained to the College of Physicians and Surgeons to remove his ventilator and sedate him to death, although Paul was not capable of consenting to being killed. He wanted to live so bad. Paul loved life so much. Life had dealt him such terrible, dirty blows, but he loved it so much, and he was so happy to see me. But in that last visit on April 22nd of 2024, I could see that they had killed him. And I left. After Paul died, then my sister went after me. She flew in again from Ontario and had a 4-day hearing in front of a judge, Madam Justice Judith E. Hoffman, who went ahead with 4 full days of hearing, even though I had 2 medical certificates from my doctor and my cardiologist saying I couldn't appear in court for longer than 2 hours a day. But the judge said that she thought because I had said that I could take care of Paul, then that meant that the warnings from my doctor and my cardiologist were not valid. So she went ahead with 2 full-day hearings, and she found me to be a vexatious litigant. So that is a very draconian and unusual designation, which takes away all of my rights. So they took away all of Paul's basic human rights and locked him away with no visitors for 2 years and for 588 days. And then they went after me and took away my rights, even though I had practiced law pretty successfully for 23 years. So after I was designated a vexatious litigant, I applied to the Court of Appeal of British Columbia. My application to set that designation aside was dismissed. I applied for permission to appeal to the Supreme Court of Canada, and after 6 months, that application was also dismissed. So I'm now considered to be or designated a vexatious litigant. So I can't even defend myself in court. If somebody sues me, I can't even respond without permission of a judge. And during all of this, the legal documents that I had prepared, the legal binders or the application brief that I had prepared, disappeared off the desk of the judge. So when we appeared before the judge about Paul's guardianship, I had filed 6 binders with documents that were properly put in a table and bound, copied and bound, but they disappeared from the judge's bench. And then when I appeared in front of the judge for the vexatious litigant application, my documents were gone. And I pointed out to the judge that that my sister's lawyers hadn't bothered to copy and file my documents, my responding documents in the binders. And she didn't say anything. So after I was designated a vexatious litigant, and I started to pay more attention to the legal aspects of euthanasia in Canada, which I hadn't had time to pay attention to. And I discovered that in February of 2015, 11 years ago, that the Supreme Court of Canada unanimously and anonymously, so normally judges sign their decisions and their reasons for judgment in cases, but this decision, which reversed an earlier decision dismissing an application for euthanasia. Sven Robinson, who was a member of parliament, the first new Democratic Party member of parliament, his claim to fame was that he really wanted this woman named Sue Rodriguez to be killed. I believe she had multiple sclerosis, and he went right to the Supreme Court of Canada in a written decision with reasons. They said, no, it's against public policy to have doctors and nurses kill innocent, vulnerable Canadians. And that's where the law stood. Also, capital punishment was set aside in Canada in 1999. So there was no more capital punishment for capital crimes like murder or treason. But in February of 2015, while all of this was going on, when dealing with the issues with Paul, the Supreme Court of Canada, as I said, anonymously and unanimously set aside their earlier decision that it was against public policy to kill Canadian citizens. And they said, and the case was with regards to a woman named Kay Carter, who had a condition called spinal stenosis, which is kind of like a fusing of the bones in the spine. And she had a group called Death with Dignity, a nonprofit organization that was very anxious to promote the killing of Canadian citizens by doctors and nurses as some kind of right to pay with taxpayer funds doctors and nurses to kill Canadian citizens. And as I said, the Supreme Court of Canada, which at the time, its Chief Justice was a woman named Beverly McLaughlin, who I've actually met. I met her when I was going to law school. I went to a Women in the Law conference, and I was so thrilled to meet Chief Justice, or then Supreme Court of Canada Justice. She was this tiny little woman, and even elderly when I was going to law school. But in any event, she was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada that reversed its earlier decision that it was against public policy to pay doctors and nurses to kill Canadian citizens. And they allowed that this woman, Kay Carter, to be killed by a regular doctor and nurse, even though she had long been dead. It was a moot case. In other words, there was no real case before the court. Kay Carter had gone to Switzerland and had a doctor in Switzerland kill her. But the Supreme Court of Canada felt that it was really important to change the law that it had already set down in the Sue Rodriguez case so that Canadians could be killed extrajudicially by doctors and nurses. And they gave the Canadian government a year to come up with a scheme to kill Canadians, even though in the history of the world, no government has ever been able to devise a scheme to kill its elderly, sick, and disabled citizens in a way that, taking into account human nature, did not protect everyone from the abuses of that system and abuses of human nature and the abuses of a powerful government against already very marginalized people. When I asked I asked Gemini for the argument against euthanasia, and they said, number one is there's no informed consent because we don't know what death is. And number two, it's permanent, it's irreversible, so that even if a mistake is made, there's no way to correct it. And number three, there's the fallacy of implementation. So the Germans and pre-war World War II, Germany in 1933 under Hitler, instituted a system where they gassed everyone in the institutions, everyone in hospitals. Hitler called them useless mouths. And by the time World War II even started, he had killed 350,000 people extrajudicially, just the way that Canada is killing people. So it's not assisted suicide. It's a doctor or a nurse, and all it takes are two medical professionals, either a doctor or a nurse, and the signature of the patient on a piece of paper, and that person will be killed. And I started looking into some instances of for one thing, this system, if you can call it a system, euthanasia has, please never use the term, start by never using the made-up term the Canadian government has created to whitewash this horrific descent into hell of euthanasia. They call it MAID. Never, I've heard Andrew Lawton, the member of parliament, talk about against MAID. Don't ever use that word. Use murder or euthanasia or killing or execution. Never use the word MAID, because the word medical for medical assistance in dying is from the Greek to heal. It's the Greek verb to heal, and you don't heal anyone by killing them. And we've known that for 40,000 years. The beginning of human civilization was when human beings, Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, did not kill their elderly, sick, and marginalized members of their communities. So just a couple of points I wanted to make about what's happened since euthanasia. So now Canada will have killed about 45 people, executed extrajudicially with no judicial or legal oversight whatsoever, about 45 people today. Regular doctors and nurses who perform other health-giving or medical tasks are the ones who are tasked with killing people this way. So Canada will have killed more than 100,000 innocent, vulnerable, mostly Canadian-born women by July of 2026. So 45 people will be executed extrajudicially by Canada today. You paid to have, with your taxpayer funds, paid to have Canada kill extrajudicially 45 innocent, vulnerable people today with no right to legal advice or a second opinion. And just a couple of instances. Recently, an elderly woman said no. She changed her mind after she signed this little piece of paper that they give you to sign. And the witness, one of the witnesses of the two witnesses who are not trained in law or history or ethics, one of the two medical witnesses said that the patient had changed her mind and he wasn't going to go ahead with it, and he crossed his name off the piece of paper. And so they just found there was already, because he felt there was an issue with undue coercion from her husband. And they just went and found another witness, and he signed it, and they killed her anyways, even though she changed her mind. A woman very recently in Vancouver, an 84-year-old woman who was subsequently found to be suffering from a broken tailbone, was offered death. She walked into emergency at Vancouver General Hospital, where I've been many times. I've taken my children many times. She walked into emergency, and a young woman physician walked up to her and said, "We've decided to offer you MAID." Of course, this terrorized this poor woman, and it was later found out this doctor didn't ask her one question about her condition. And it was subsequently found out that she had a broken tailbone from which she healed completely. And then she went and traveled around the world. She went to Greece to prove that, she wasn't over the hill. The Canadian government ghoulishly, the ghoulish, and I call it government in quotation marks because we now know that, like North Korea and China, we have a majority government, this liberal majority government that was not elected. They're already calculating and publishing the savings that they're getting from killing 45 people a day extrajudicially. And as I said, mostly Canadian-born citizens and mostly women. So in this video, I just wanted to briefly touch upon why would we now know that Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, the head of the Liberal Party, induced 4 Conservative members of Parliament to cross the floor from the opposition to his side, to the government side. 4 Conservative members and 1 NDP member. And I submit that the NDP member, a woman named Lori Idlout, Idlout, from Nunavut, was persuaded because her son had just been charged by the government with possession of child pornography after extensive investigation by various government agencies. And so miraculously, he gets charged with possession of child pornography with serious sanctions, facing serious sanctions, and she crosses the floor. And also, it's now the benefit to her riding from the government has given in association with this floor crossing amounts to $6,000 of benefits per person in her riding. So why would Mark Carney risk criminal investigation and sanctions for breaching Section 121? I used to be a federal prosecutor. That was the start of my legal career. So why would Mark Carney risk being investigated and charged and possibly convicted and go to prison for a breach of Section 121 of the Criminal Code? So that's improper influencing of government officials. Why would he take that risk? And I believe that it's because he knows in what deep trouble the Liberal government already is. That they're killing 45 people a day. This is the exact issue that is the basis of World War II. World War II was started after Hitler had been getting away with killing innocent, vulnerable, sick, elderly, and disabled people before World War II. And then he branched out into his final solution of killing Jewish people, gay people, prisoners of war, and others. As we know, he killed 6 million Jewish people by gassing them. Most primarily Jewish people, by gassing them. So he knows the reason he would take the risk of enticing, bribing 4 members of parliament from the opposing party, from the opposition, to cross the floor is because he knows that the Liberal Party, if it's deposed in an election, fair and square, and the Conservatives take control, he's facing criminal charges. That the Liberal Party and everyone associated with this killing scheme, this euthanasia in Canada, is facing criminal sanctions on the scale of the Nuremberg trials. And many of the people in many of the defendants in the Nuremberg trials after World War II for crimes against humanity were hanged for crimes against humanity. So those are my thoughts for today. Do everything you can in your power, but start by never saying made, never call euthanasia or extrajudicial executions of elderly, sick, and disabled people in Canada. Never call it made. Call it by what it is, extrajudicial executions. So that's it for today. Please share this video far and wide. I'm being shadow banned by YouTube and all of the platforms. My YouTube channel, my first YouTube channel where I talked about this was destroyed, was nuked by YouTube. And I've lost all my personal videos that I had posted there. And I've been banned for life from X and banned from LinkedIn. So it's very hard to share this very basic information. Oh, there was one last point that I wanted to bring up again, is that Beverly McLaughlin, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, was the architect of this decision to reverse the prohibition against euthanasia in Canada, and upheld which was enunciated in the Rodriguez decision and in the Criminal Code section against murder in the first degree. So Beverly McLaughlin, immediately after making this decision as part of the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada, actually went to work on the Chinese Hong Kong Court of Appeals for 6 years, from 2018 to 2024. So if you want to talk about Chinese interference which has resulted in the death of soon to be 100,000 Canadian citizens, I would point to that as being the linchpin. And I would point the finger at Beverly McLaughlin, who was the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Canada that made this egregious, unlawful decision that will soon be resulting in the death of more than 100,000 innocent, vulnerable Canadian citizens. So that's it for today. As I said, please share this video far and wide and never ever say made again. I love you all.